and provide pollutant removal. For years, the stormwater,
There are requirements for security around crops and everything else that I believe come through the existing state regulations. You know, water, well use, everything is heavily regulated. Our thought was if someone can meet all those regulations in a farm area, we don't restrict it from a zoning perspective. I'll run through and then you can...
Ed, what's his name, Forcion Weedman, he's
Oh,
been
yeah.
around for a long time. Yeah, okay, so how do you know him? I
He
know him.
showed up at one of our meetings.
Yeah, where does he live? You know his shop?
He was down
Anyway,
south. I don't know where he
so they're all up in the small people, the small, I don't want to say, there are shops that they're just, I guess, ignoring what's going on in the back room right now, like in Trenton. There are some things going on. And they're calling it the black and gray market dealers, and they feel that there's barriers to them becoming legal. They want to become legal, but at the same time, it's cost prohibitive. So,
a couple of months was, tonight in our packet we have a copy of the zoning map. You've got a brief summary of a discussion that the attorney and I and the administrator had with our zoning officer, just to get some background. And so you've got a first set of considerations. As we discussed it, it became clear that I think our zoning has to address each of the 6 classes of licenses and where, if at all, we would allow those to be zoned. So my thought is tonight we get feedback from the committee on the considerations that are on paper, just because that's something we can talk about, and then we would direct the attorney to draft it into the form of what the ordinance would actually look like. So for the next meeting, we could have something more detailed that we review. I think we would want to then send it to the planning board for them to provide input on something that we, another concrete.
We've been target for the last 2.5 years. The ground is solidified a lot, but not completely. There's still some issues being worked out, but the governor did sign the bill. There are now 6 classes. Throughout the negotiation, there had been, started out as 3, but there's 6 distinct classes of cannabis activity. And as the mayor said, we do have the first issue is we do have the right to prohibit any or all of those classes, 1 through 6: cultivation, manufacturing, wholesaler, distributor, retail, and delivery headquarters. And just to clarify, if we were to, for example, prohibit delivery headquarters, that would not prevent delivery headquarters from other municipalities delivering into our residents. So the other issues have to do with what zones these will be permitted in, whether we're going to take action to regulate it, or in essence just allow it to proceed, which it'll default more or less to a conditional use, and it'll be a case-by-case basis as it goes for land use review. So again, the distinction of the 6 classes is the first clear guidance, and the 6-month deadline expiring in August. The decision we make to once the 6-month period expires, if we haven't taken any action to ban anything, we're locked into that permissive position for 5 years.
Our thought here was, that we're a right to farm community. The state and others are heavily regulating what can happen where. We, for example, the SADC, from the last information I have, is stuck in a little bit of a quandary because cannabis is a federally illegal crop to grow, but now it is legal in the state, and so they're going to need more time to work out whether it's a crop that qualifies for a farm activity or doesn't qualify, because I believe the SADC regulations right now say you cannot grow federally illegal crops. So we're not going to have perfect information in the next couple of months for what we do, but the thought was it's going to be heavily regulated and practically these are grown in giant greenhouses to get any kind of scale. So it's going to be the Highland regulation for how much impervious coverage they can have. It's reasonably protected, but the thought is if someone's got a 10-acre farm, and let's say 3 or 4 10-acre farms want to gather up together and form some sort of co-op and get into this business, do we want to restrict our farmers from a crop?
Regulation would have to go to the land use board, would have to go to the planning board, and that's why, you know, we hear August, and it's like, oh, and as we all know, back and forth between boards, months.
This meeting, and that we hadn't formed any kind of a subcommittee, and this is not a brief meeting. There's a lot of good work that went into this. I can see that, but the fact that I don't know if Abe was. I mean, Abe is the liaison to zoning and legal. I did a whole big presentation on marijuana. I knew nothing about this meeting, so I need to sit down with this for a while and take a look at it. But I just feel like we should have known, because again, it's not just one person running this whole thing. It's my thoughts. Just my thoughts. Medicinal value. Just so you know, that's what the federal problem is, besides the interstate travel. So what they're saying now is that, expect the changes in the laws in the coming weeks, months, and years that will take additional steps to protect employees and employers and jobs where safety standards are needed. There should be no confusion about workers' rights and employer responsibilities to protect workplace safety. For example, the healthcare industry, childcare, law enforcement, employees who operate heavy machinery or equipment. So, and then if you jump to the time frame and the prerequisites, the reason they're saying it's going to take so many months to ramp up this medical supply and accommodate the over 21 market at the same time at these medical dispensaries is because currently patients are already complaining of long lines and supply shortages. The number of medical marijuana card holders has grown by tens of thousands since Governor Murphy took office, but New Jersey has only seen 7 new dispensaries open in that amount of time. Growing new marijuana from seed to harvest can take 3 to 4 months, and expanding cultivation sites to both serve the medical community and continue to be wholesale providers to other operators that sell but do not grow is crucial to creating the sufficient inventories. I was talking about the marijuana license applicants, that they have the year-long moratorium is pushed out, but there's currently 147 paused applicants. That's what they're going to be looking at right now. And this is an interesting area. All 6 members have been chosen. Originally, it's going to be 5 members, I think, but now there's 6 members on this cannabis board, and I have all their bios. If anybody's interested, just let me know. I can send it to you. The law is, as I mentioned last time, is limiting the number of licenses to 37 during the first 2 years of legalization, but 10% of those licenses are being reserved for entrepreneurial micro businesses. That comes with limits on the total employees, how much more marijuana is sold or handled, and it's designed for those who want to run a small operation or need the room and the experience to grow into a full-fledged cannabis business. Now, Lieutenant Stephen Jordan Jr. Stephen joined the Lebanon Township Police Department in 1971 and retired in 1991, and we'd like to extend our condolences to his family. And Tom, I know you wanted to say.
I just want to add that he was represented with a full honor with our chief and our officers there, and they proceeded with a full honor to the actual cemetery. You may have known Stephen Jordan. He was at our pancake breakfast, big Dallas Cowboy fan, and he'll be greatly missed. I will say it was a testimony to him to see his family there, grandchildren, and we will
miss it, the stormwater permit. So the new stormwater management ordinance is helping to comply with the Green Infrastructure Act of New Jersey. And in general, the purpose of the Green Infrastructure Act is to enhance and promote groundwater recharge and groundwater quality. The state has identified certain areas where groundwater recharge is very important. There was actually a geologic survey report number 32, which was taken on by the state, and they identified certain areas where groundwater recharge is to be promoted and enhanced. And so the purpose of the stormwater ordinance is to cover projects that arise that will exceed certain thresholds, and and they will be required to design into their site plan and stormwater management requirements the features that are going to enhance it there. And I wanted to just start a little bit of the history of stormwater ordinance here in Lebanon Township. The stormwater regulations were adopted back in 2006, and Lebanon Township first adopted a stormwater ordinance in 2008. Steve Reese was the engineer there, and he put that ordinance together for you folks. Then, I think it was 2015 or 2016, the stormwater ordinance was updated. It was primarily due to the Highlands regulations. The Highlands regulations were impacted it then. And right now, Lebanon Township is covered under the statewide Najipti's permit. They're a Tier B discharger, and that had to do with the requirements of the ordinance. For example, last year, our staff engineer Casey went around with Warren to all the different...
Constantly developing, but it seems that the path, each one of these classes requires a separate license.
Right.
And it seems like the path of the larger players, the groups that do this, they will be applying for 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Right.
And it seems that when the manufacturing and the wholesale is part and parcel of a larger growth facility, and that we should anticipate, and this is literally within the last couple of days, it's getting a little clearer, that people that are going to cultivate a large swath of it enough to be a wholesaler are most likely going to seek to do all 4 of those first classes.
30th. So we're posting downstairs. I think it's going down tomorrow. They're actually posting to get the guys to sign up, who are the girls, gals, whatever, for interviews. Question for Matt, just so clarifying this. So it needs to be posted for 10 days. Is that the
10 days is sufficient, yes.
Okay. Is it 10 business days or 10
Consecutive days?
It's 10 calendar days.
10 calendar, okay, so we're fine. So then to that extent is because we have 3 weeks essentially between now and our next meeting, and trying to give our new potential chief as much time with the existing chief, I would like to see if we could put on the calendar for the 31st, the 1st, and the 6th as potential days for interviews. So that way on the 7th, we could actually make the announcement for who will be the succession of our chief.
What were those dates?
Yes,
Manufacturing. And our thought was somewhat obviously to restrict that to our industrial zones, which the map is kind of small, but we've got a couple of industrial zones. I think the most notable one is up 513, where someone might want to be able to manufacture. Again, they have to follow all the state regulations for all the security and emissions and everything else. Wholesaler, again, kind of a warehouse situation. I don't think we want to have people in residential zones putting up a Butler building and calling themselves a wholesaler. So again, we thought limit that to the industrial zones. Distributor, and this is not the home delivery, this is people who would distribute to different manufacturers and then from manufacturers to retailers. Again, it seemed obvious to think that would be in the industrial zone. And again, following up on Abe's question, where we would get to eventually, if you look up our code, I think it's section 400-9, we list out the different zones, and under that we have different activities. There's a table you'll see, and an activity like a hotel in a certain zone may say PPU for principal permitted use or CU for conditional use. So that's why I wanted to do this kind of in layers. We'll come back and decide, do we want conditional use or do we want to make it permitted? And if it's potentially permitted, that means the zoning officer can sign off if everything's required. If it's conditional, it means it always comes back to a board to review. So